this video, we're going to configure a percentage-based grade center in Blackboard. In a brand new Blackboard course, this is what your grade center will look like. After you add tests, drop boxes, and discussion forums to a content area like lessons, those grade center columns will appear automatically after this total column, like this. The first thing we need to do is make sure that the categories into which Blackboard placed all of these assignments match the categories that you have on your syllabus. So let's go to Manage, Categories. And you can see that Blackboard automatically placed the 2 drop boxes in the assignment category, the discussion forums in the discussion category, and tests into the test category. Blackboard does this automatically by default every time you create a Dropbox, discussion forum, or test. But you can change these categories and you can create your own categories. Let's take a look at the syllabus for this course. And I have a tests category, so that matches the test category that Blackboard used. I have a class discussions category, which matches the discussion category that Blackboard used. However, I also have an essays category, but Blackboard does not have that category. It has an assignment category into which it placed the 2 drop boxes that I plan to have students uploading essays to. So to be consistent with my syllabus, I need to pull those drop boxes out of the assignment category and put them in an essay category. But first I have to create the essay category. To do that, I click Create Category, and I name it the same thing it's named on my syllabus, Essays. And I click Submit. And I now have an Essays category. Notice that there is a square box to the left of Essays, and that box allows me to edit or delete that category. That's because I created the category. You cannot edit or delete any of the default categories in Blackboard. While we can look at categories and create categories in this Categories window, we can't move assignments in and out of the categories. So I'm going to click OK. And to move assignments to different categories, I go to Manage, Column Organization. Scroll down to my assignments. And I want to move the 2 drop boxes out of the assignment category and into the essays category. So I put check marks next to them because they're both going into the same category. And I select Change Category to Essays. And now they are in the Essays category. I click Submit. And now all of my assignment categories match what's on my syllabus: tests, essays, discussions. Notice that the syllabus also has a final exam on it that's weighted by itself. In other words, it's one assignment that is weighted alone. It's not part of a group of assignments like tests, essays, class discussions. In Blackboard, you can weight single assignments. But notice that as we scroll through the Grade Center, there is no final exam. That's because the final exam is not in a content area. It's an exam that I'm going to give in front of my students in a proctored environment, and they're going to fill out a Scantron sheet. It's not something they're going to take and submit in Blackboard. Therefore, there's no automatic Grade Center column. I'm going to have to create the Grade Center column for that final exam. Whenever you have an assignment like this that you give outside of Blackboard, you create your own Grade Center column by clicking Create Column, and you give your column a name, and it should be the same name that's on your syllabus. In this case, Final Exam. Primary display is what students see in the Grade Center, and because this is a percentage-based gradebook, you want the primary display to be percentage. Score will display the number of points the student achieved. Let's choose percentage. Secondary display will display to you only next to the primary display. And if you want to make a selection there, you can. Category, by default, is no category. And if you look at the syllabus, we don't need a category because this is a single assignment that will be weighted at 20%. So we will leave category at its default, no category. Points, 100. I'm going to scroll down. You can set a due date, and if you do, this assignment and its due date will automatically appear on the calendar. Leave options at their defaults and click Submit. And we now have a final exam column. By default, new columns always appear at the end of the grade center. Once you have all of your assignments in your grade center, you want to start manipulating the grade center to make it look the way you want it to look. We have a lot of scrolling in here, and you're going to have much more in a real grade center where you have dozens of assignments. So the first thing we want to do is hide columns that we don't need to see. To do that, you hover over Manage, Column Organization. You scroll down and you put check marks next to any column that you don't want to see in your grade center. And then you hover over Show Hide and select Hide Selected Columns. Those columns are now italicized and ghosted. You can also move columns around in column organization. Let's say I want my discussion forums to appear first in my grade center. I click the cross arrows to the left of the assignment that I want to move, and I drag. I'm going to do the same thing with the second discussion forum. Click and drag. And now they will appear first in the grade center. By default, the grade center in Blackboard freezes the last name and the first name columns. If you want additional columns frozen, which means that as you scroll through your grade center, those columns won't move. I want my weighted total column to be frozen, so I click the cross arrows to the left of weighted total and I drag it above this frozen line. I want the total column to appear right next to the weighted total. So I'm going to click it and drag it, but I don't want it frozen, so I won't drag it above that frozen line. And now my grade center will hide columns I don't want to see and will show them in the organization pattern that I want the grade center to display. When I'm finished, I click Submit. And here is my grade center displaying the way I want it to. In a percentage-based grade center, your weighted total column should always be set as your external grade. The external grade serves two functions in Blackboard. Number one, it is the grade that will display to students as their running course average and their final grade. And number two, when Blackboard interfaces with Banner, it is the grade that will report to Banner as the student's final grade. By default, Blackboard makes the total column the external grade in all new grade centers. This green check mark next to the total column means it is set as the external grade. To change that, we click the arrow to the right of the weighted total column and click Set as External Grade. And now the green check mark displays to the left of the weighted total column. The last thing we're going to do in Grade Center is configure these important weighted total and total columns. I'm going to use the total column to display a letter grade. If you don't want to display a letter grade, you can delete the total column by clicking the arrow to the right and choosing Delete Column. Let's configure the weighted total column first. Click the arrow to the right and click Edit Column Information. First thing I want to do is rename the column to something that makes sense to students, such as course average. The primary display by default is percentage, and that's what it should be. Let's scroll down. I'm not going to choose a secondary display. Scroll down to Select Columns. This is where we weight the grade center. And you have to look at what your syllabus displays. Tests on my syllabus are worth 20%, so I'm going to weight the test category in Blackboard. If you look under Select Columns, the top box displays assignments and other columns that are not categories, and the bottom box displays only categories. So we want the test category to be weighted, so we're going to click Tests, and then we click the bottom arrow since we're in the bottom box and bring it over. According to the syllabus, tests are weighted at 20%, so I put 20 in here. Next to weight columns, you decide whether you want Blackboard to weight the columns in this category equally or proportionally. Equally means each test in this category will carry the same portion of this 20% regardless of how many points the test is worth. Proportionally means that a test that's worth more points will carry a higher portion of this 20%. For example, if you have two tests and one test is worth 100 points and one test is worth 10 points, the test worth 100 points is going to carry a much higher portion of this 20%. If all of your assignments in a category are worth the same number of points, it doesn't matter which you choose. I'm going to choose equally. If you want Blackboard to drop the highest or the lowest grades in this category, you put the number of highest or lowest in these boxes. Notice that below the selected columns box, Blackboard is keeping track of the weight of your grade center. This total weight must be 100% or you're going to have a skewed grade center. Next, our syllabus says essays are worth 50%. So I'm going to bring the essays category over. Bottom box, which displays categories, I click essays, and then I click the second arrow, and I now weight essays. According to my syllabus, essays are 50%. So I'll put a 50 in here. I'm going to weight my columns equally, which means no matter how many points an essay is worth, each essay gets an equal portion of that 50%. I don't want Blackboard to drop any grades. Notice that down here, when I click outside this white box, Blackboard tells me that I've got 70% of my grade center configured. Class discussions, 10% according to my syllabus, so I'm going to bring the discussion category over by clicking it and then clicking this second arrow. And discussions are 10% on the syllabus, so I'm going to weight discussions at 10%, weight them equally and not drop any grades. Click down here next to total weight and I'm up to 80%, and according to my syllabus the final exam is worth 20%. Now the final exam is not in a category. We put it in no category, so we're going to find that final exam in the top box. Let's scroll and we click Final Exam, and we click the top arrow this time because we're weighting something in that top box. The syllabus says it's worth 20%. I'll put a 20 in here. A word of caution, if you weight something in that top box, don't also weight its category. We have the drop boxes and the tests and the discussion forums in that top box. We're not going to weight them because we weighted their categories. So weight either the category or the assignment. When we're finished weighting and we see that 100% displays here and we make sure that it is consistent with what is on our syllabus, we scroll and we make sure that Calculate as Running Total is selected. It is selected by default. You leave your options at their defaults and you click Submit. And now in the grade center, the weighted total is called Course Average, and it is set as the external grade. Last, you need to either delete this total column or configure it so that it displays a letter grade. Let's configure it as a letter grade, clicking the arrow to the right and choosing Edit Column Information. First, let's give it a different name. We're going to call it Letter Grade. Primary display is score. That's not what we want. If we click this arrow, we want this column to display as a letter, no rounding. We're not going to choose a secondary display. Now under Select Columns, we have to tell Blackboard how to configure that letter grade. Based on what? By default, all grade columns is selected, but you want to change that to Selected Columns and Categories. Scroll. And we want Blackboard to base this letter grade only on one thing, on the student's course average. We click it because it's in the top box. We click the top arrow, and that's all we have to do. We're telling Blackboard, display the letter grade based on what the student's course average is. Scroll and make sure Calculate as Running Total is selected. By default, it should be. Leave your options at their defaults and click Submit. And your total column is now called Letter Grade, and your grade center is completely configured. When you create a grade center column using Create Column, you set the primary display while you're creating the column. However, when columns are automatically created by adding a discussion forum, Dropbox assignment, or test to a content area, only Dropbox assignments allow you to choose a primary display during the creation of the assignment. Discussion forums and tests automatically set the primary display for student grades to score. To change the primary display for discussion forums and tests, you must edit each grade center column by clicking the arrow to the right of the column name, choosing Edit Column Information, and setting the primary display to percentage. Click Submit, and that grade center column for the Introduce Yourselves discussion forum will now display grades to students as percentages. And you do this for each discussion forum and test in your grade center. You cannot delete grade center columns that are attached to an assignment in a content area. If you click the arrow to the right of a test, you do not see a delete column option. The same for a discussion forum, no delete column option, or Dropbox, no delete column option. To delete those columns, you first have to delete the item in the content area, and you will be given the choice when you delete the item in the content area to also delete its grade center column. If you create the column via Create Column, you can delete it. By clicking the arrow next to Final Exam, I can see a Delete Column option. You can also delete other columns in the grade center if, number one, they are not set as the external grade, and number two, they do not contain student information. For example, we cannot delete the last name or the first name columns. If we click the arrow, there is no delete column option. And we cannot delete the course average column because it's set as the external grade. If we click the arrow next to course average, there is no delete column option. We can, however, delete the letter grade column because it's not a student information column and it's also not set as the external grade. As students drop your course and withdraw from your course throughout the semester, the scripts that Blackboard administrators run will remove those students from your course and you won't see them in the course or in the grade center. However, if you manually disable a student and want to hide that student permanently in your grade center, it's very easy to do. First, go to the full grade center and you will recognize students whom you have manually disabled from the course, because each one will have this icon next to his name. To see what the various icons in the grade center mean, open your icon legend, and each icon will display with an explanation next to it. There are two ways to hide students permanently in your grade center. If you just have one or two students to hide, you can do it right here in the grade center by clicking the arrow next to the student's last name or first name, and then choosing Hide Row. And the student is permanently hidden in your grade center. To display the student's name again, hover over Manage and choose Row Visibility. Hidden students are grayed out and italicized. Simply put a check mark next to the name and click Show Rows. Click Submit, and the student reappears in the grade center. If you have several students that you want to hide, it's easier to hide them all at once by going to Manage, Row Visibility, putting check marks next to the names of each student you want to hide, clicking Hide Rows, and notice that the students' names are grayed out and italicized. Click Submit, and the students are permanently hidden in the grade center unless you return to Manage, Row Visibility to make those names display again.